Let's talk Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And folks, on this mini Locked On Syracuse podcast, we're going to do a 10 to 15 minute preview of the upcoming matchup tonight between Syracuse basketball and Texas Tech. I'm going to give you a little overview on the Red Raiders. We talk about JT Toppin, their best player, and the stakes for the matchup tonight. So, Syracuse basketball plays its second and final game of the Legends Classic tonight at 7 Eastern. Syracuse basketball last night, they lost a close one, back and forth, particularly in the final 15 minutes to Texas, 70-66. If they hit their free throws, they win that game. But you know what? They didn't. Ifs and buts, it doesn't matter. They lost, right? We talked about it all on last night's podcast. Texas Tech played after Syracuse, and they were a big favorite against St. Joe's, and they lost. We'll get to why they lost later on this mini edition of the Locked On Syracuse podcast, but they lost 78-77 to St. Joe's last night in an upset. So, Syracuse basketball, because they lost, and Texas Tech lost, that means the two squads are facing off tonight at 7 o'clock Eastern. Here's what you need to know about Texas Tech. Heading into last night, they were a fringe top 25 team in the country. The reason why I say fringe is because they were, I believe, just inside of the top 25, but they're kind of in that bubble of the top 25 where, one loss can take them out, one loss can really advance them. But they were very good advanced metric-wise. Texas Tech was 10th in KenPom last night, and then they lost to St. Joe's. So they fell all the way down to 19th. But that's still really good in KenPom. And they are led by sophomore forward, New Mexico State transfer from this offseason, JT Toppin. Guys, this dude is an animal. He is really, really, really good. That is what you need to know about him, okay, guys? Kind of like Trey Johnson last night, Toppin is off to a terrific start with his new team. Toppin has good size for a forward. He's 6'9". He's physical. He can play down low. He can play up high. It really doesn't matter. When he has the ball in his hands, look out for JT Toppin. And last night, he was not really the reason why Texas Tech lost. He had 22 points on 8 of 13 shooting from the field, and he had 18 rebounds. He's 6'9", which I said is a good size for a forward, but he is an excellent rebounder. I believe this season he's averaging double-digit rebounds, so they're going to have to keep him off the glass, which is a lot easier said than done. He was an excellent rebounder over at New Mexico State. So really, the way I look at it with JT Toppin is kind of like how I did with Trey Johnson last night. They're not going to stop him. They're not. But can they limit his effectiveness? That's what Syracuse did with Trey Johnson last night. Trey Johnson, he had a good point total, but I believe he was like 4 of 17 from the field. Right? He still made awesome plays. He still showcased why he's going to be an NBA player next year, but Syracuse did a nice job of limiting him. And that's what they're going to also have to do with JT Toppin. Overall, Texas Tech is not a team that has a ton of size, but they still rebound at a very, very high clip. I'm going to get to why they lost in just a moment to St. Joe's, but Texas Tech out-rebounded St. Joe's last night 44-28. They still lost. So now you might be wondering, well, why did Texas Tech lose the game? How? They were a big favorite. Their best player played like their best player. They out-rebounded the team by a big margin. What happened? Well, sometimes it's very simple. It's shooting. Three-point shooting is the reason why they lost. Okay, Texas Tech last night, 4 of 20 from three-point land. That's not good. That's 20%. St. Joe's, they got hot. They were 12 of 22. That's 55%. Sometimes, guys, it's not that complicated. One team gets hot from deep. The other's really cold. And, well, the team that got hot, they won. Credit to St. Joe's for getting hot. But despite that, Texas Tech still only lost by 1 point. That just shows how good of a team they are, that they can be extremely cold from deep and still be well within a game and have a chance to win the game at the end. So for Cuse, they're going to have to hope that Texas Tech can stay cold for just one more game. Texas Tech this season, 41% from deep, counting last night. So they are still a pretty good shooting team. So Syracuse, they're going to have their three-point defense still on their A game. So that's a little bit about JT Toppin and Texas Tech. Once again, the two squads are facing off tonight at 7 o'clock Eastern in the second game of the Legends Classic. Now, coming up, I'm going to give you guys the stakes for this game tonight for Syracuse. It was either the best outcome for the Orange last night or the worst outcome for the Orange last night, depending on how you look at it. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Let's talk some Syracuse basketball, shall we? They are a 10.5-point underdog to Texas Tech tonight. The Orange, they nearly pulled off an upset last night to Texas on a very similar point spread. Can they complete the mission tonight? Well, that's up for you to decide. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. This is Locked On Syracuse, and I'm Jackson Holzer, and we are breaking down Syracuse versus Texas Tech tonight. Earlier, I gave you guys a little bit of a matchup preview with Texas Tech, talked about their best player, JT Toppin, and the fact that they really lost to St. Joe's because, well, one team got hot from deep and the other did not. It's as simple as that sometimes. Now let's go over kind of the stakes of this game for Syracuse. Let's talk about it from a Syracuse standpoint, okay? This is a Locked On Syracuse podcast. Syracuse, all right? The outcome of last night, as I teased, it was either the best thing for Syracuse basketball or the worst thing for Syracuse basketball. And I'm not talking about their matchup against Texas. I'm talking about their opponent right now and the fact that Texas Tech lost to St. Joe's. The way I see it is this. I honestly think it was better that Texas Tech lost to St. Joe's. And the reason is simple. Syracuse probably would have had a quote-unquote easier time against St. Joe's. That was the expected outcome of last night, that Syracuse was going to play St. Joe's tonight. You'd feel good about that game, potentially, that they could win it. But it would not be a resume-building win, and it could be considered a resume not entirely crushing, but not a good loss to have on your resume. Last night, by the way, the reason why I mentioned not a good loss is because, well, last night was a good loss for Syracuse. They went up in KenPom after their loss to Texas. I'm telling you, sometimes losing close to a really good team is better than narrowly beating a bad team, which is what could have happened if they were playing St. Joe's tonight. Instead, they are going to play Texas Tech. Despite last night, Texas Tech in all likelihood is going to end up being a quad 1 win or a quad 1 loss for Syracuse. So the way I look at it is simple. If Syracuse wins this game, it's a big resume building win. If they lose this game, okay, well, what was the margin of defeat? If it's a similar game to last night, hopefully they don't fall behind by 16. That'll be bad. But if it's similar to last night, that they lose by 4 points to Texas Tech, that's not a bad outcome. It's not. It's much better than... Now, look, is the record pretty? Going 0-2 is not fun, but it's about as good of an 0-2 as you can have if they were to go 0-2. For those that don't understand maybe the quad system, because I said quad 1 win, quad 1 loss, I'll just briefly summarize it here for you guys. Basically, one of the factors that is used to determine teams for the NCAA tournament is their strength of schedule in evaluating how a team did versus their strength of schedule. Quad 1 games are considered the toughest games on a team's schedule. And that's why I say that quad one is big for a team like Texas Tech on Syracuse's schedule now. It's a big-time matchup for the Orange to potentially get either a big win or a close loss. It's a resume builder, potentially. That being said, I am picking Texas Tech to win this game, and I hope I'm wrong. They are a 10.5-point favorite to win. I have Texas Tech winning 75-67. Leave your score prediction in the comments section below. I'll give you some keys for Syracuse in this one tonight. Number one, keep the rebounding margin to a respectable level. St. Joe's last night really playing with fire, getting out-rebounded by so much. Don't do that. Last night was respectable. I mean, they lost it by 5 to Texas. That's fine. They had some breakdowns at the end. They couldn't box out Weaver. But other than that, they were fine with rebounding. So keep that up. Get hot from deep. That's literally what St. Joe's did. Get hot from deep. I say this because it's time for Chris Bell to have a game. It's time. We know he can shoot. We know why he's on the floor, despite what many people think, like, oh, they shouldn't play him. Like, they have to play him. They have to. He's their best shooter. But he's got to play like it now. It's time for Chris Bell to have himself a big game where he goes off for 5, 6, 7 threes. Start on time. I've talked about this with football sometimes. They did it last week against Cal. Don't fall behind by 16 points. Falling behind by 16 is not usually a recipe for success, guys. And this is an evergreen one. Make your free throws. What's going on right now at the free throw line is not acceptable. It's not. I'm not going to rehash last night to you. If you want to check that out, feel free to do so at the end of this podcast. All right. But that being said, I got Syracuse losing 75-67. But I hope I'm wrong. But I have to be objective. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you like this video, click that like button. If you really liked it, subscribe to the channel. Turn on those notifications so you know right away when I am dropping the next podcast, which will be tonight after the game versus Texas Tech, hopefully celebrating a Syracuse victory. I will see you all then.